Okay, today I'm going to go through the installation and setup of Proxmox. So Proxmox is a virtualization system, and I want to kind of talk about that. So I'm going to show you kind of how to do that here. And first we have to record kind of the monitor. This is another one where you need a monitor, mouse, and keyboard for the setup. But after that you can run it headless and actually access it through a web GUI. So I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started. I'm going to move down here on the list to my SanDisk. Now you have SanDisk UEFI or SanDisk. In this case I'm running with legacy BIOS, so I'm just going to pick my SanDisk drive and then press enter to start the boot process. So there you see that we have the SanDisk selected. I'm just going to press enter on my keyboard. That's going to start up the boot process, and you see there we get the Proxmox logo and a little bit of information, and really this all kind of takes place pretty quickly with a mouse and keyboard to do the setup. So there you'll see that it's got the options for starting it up and booting and doing some other things. We're just going to pick that first option by pressing enter. You'll get some output into the screen via the standard out. Once you get here, you can read the EULA and then agree to it. So the agree is over here in the bottom right corner. Let me adjust the camera just a little bit for you guys so you can kind of see that, hopefully. It's a little bit tricky getting this set exactly right. Maybe that'll be a little better. Let me pull it down just a little bit, because a lot of the stuff happens there in the bottom right corner of the screen. We'll click. And then the next screen that comes up gives us a little bit of information. And on this one you want to make sure that you're picking the correct drive. So be really careful here at the bottom that you're selecting the correct drive, especially if you have a lot of drives connected like I do. So I'm using the same machine that I set up TrueNAS on and the same machine that I set up Rockstore on. So this is the same machine, so it's got a lot of drives connected. So make sure that you're picking the correct drive that you want to use for your install drive. And then once you've done that, move on. Selected the drive, I'm just going to hit next. It's already got the drive selected correctly. So on this screen you're going to see that it's got the country. I want you to set your time zone essentially. So set your country, set your time zone, and then make sure everything looks correct, and again click next. Now it wants you to create a password, so type in a root user password. Hit tab, type it again to confirm it. So type in your two passwords, and then you're going to type in a valid email address. And then click next. Finally, type in a machine host name. So in my case, I'm just going to use proxmox.local. Make sure that it's got everything set up that you want for your IP address and your gateway and your DNS settings. And then once everything looks good, again, just click forward. Finally, you'll come to the summary screen. Just make sure that everything looks good on the summary screen. Double check all the information there, and once it looks good, just click on the install button here. And you can watch the installation go. I'll fast forward through this, but basically it's going to go through an install, and then it'll come up and let us know when it's complete. Alright, now we're back at our machine, or our remote machine from the actual machine we just installed Proxmox on. So I'm going to go to https:// and I'm going to go to the IP address of that machine. Now of course yours will most likely be different, but you need to understand that you need to go to port 8006, and then you need to put that slash at the end of it. I've figured out that if I don't put the slash, it just does not get to the login page for some reason. So make sure when you put 8006 you put the slash at the end of the URL. And it does tell you that on the actual screen if you keep it connected to Proxmox whenever you're running it. Just in the terminal window there. Now it does have a self-signed certificate, so be aware that it's going to come up with a self-signed cert, so just click on Advance. and then again click on go ahead. Now of course if you're not using Firefox, it'll look a little different in Chrome or a little different in some other browsers. Now I'm going to zoom this up a little bit to make it easier to see. And when you go to log in, this is going to be root and then your root password. And then you probably want to leave it on Linux PAM standard authentication unless you changed it for some reason. And then of course pick the language that you prefer and then save username. You can check that or uncheck that. It's completely up to you. I'm going to click on login. And the first time out, it's going to tell you, hey, you don't have this thing with an activation key. This is really Proxmox saying, hey, this is how we support this project, is people go and purchase an activation key. So if you're going to use Proxmox long term, highly recommend again that you go do that. But for now, when you're testing or if you're just using it, for personal use and a little bit of light use, there's no need to do that. But note, every time you come here, this will pop up just to kind of tell you. So it's kind of the same thing as you saw on Rockstore. It's just how these projects fund the continued development so that you can continue to use these projects and get continued development with the projects. So I'm just going to click OK. So when we get in now, there's a lot to this actual user interface for Proxmox, but really what this is if you've seen my video on Virt Manager, or if you've ever used VirtualBox or any of the other virtualization systems out there, this is the same thing. This is really a system meant to be used for creating virtual machines. Even though they do have virtual containers, now these are not Docker containers, these are virtual containers. Virtual machines is kind of the whole idea around Proxmox. So it's meant to be run on a system where you want to run virtual machines. Generally, you want to have a multi-core system so you can dedicate a core or 2 or 3 to your virtual machines and still have a core for the host system to run. It's a pretty lightweight Debian system in the background, so there's not a lot that you have to do there, but we do need to jump in and make a couple of changes to some things, and we'll get into that in the next video. But for now, we're just going to kind of look at the user interface here and see what it looks like. So out of the gate, you've got this kind of setup, and you can see kind of up here in the right corner that you've got this data center, and then you can have different nodes. So you might have more than one server that's running this, and you can basically monitor and manage those things from a single page. So you could have multiple nodes where you have Proxmox running, but you can see here's my Proxmox node, and here's local Proxmox, and then here's local LVM for Proxmox. And you get these nice kind of overview pages. So if I click here and I jump down to summary, you can kind of see some graphs of what's been going on the machine just since we installed it. Not a lot happening there, obviously, because we don't have anything running on it yet. But if you go back to the data center level, you can also see a summary here of what's going on the data center level as well. Here you can see I'm using 0% basically of my CPU, 7% RAM to run the system, and 1% of the storage that I have currently allocated. So as you kind of go down here through the list and through the menus, you'll see there's quite a bit of stuff here. So you've got so if you're going to cluster these things, you can do that and set up clusters. I'm not going to do any kind of clustering. I don't have enough machines for one thing to do that. And then Ceph, I don't really remember what that is, but it says Ceph is not installed on this node, so would you like to install it now? It's not something that I'm ready to use yet, but I'll figure out what it is and see if we want to install it later. And then you have options, so you can change your options here. You have an HTTP proxy, none, which this is network information, right? This is my keyboard layout, which is English USA, which is for me correct. Console viewer is going to be default, and it's IXterm.js, which is just a JavaScript console viewer, which is great. Email from address. So this is what it's going to try to send you if you send an email. So you may want to change this because, like for me, if it tries to send from this email, my email server will stop it from sending. I'll have to actually put in a proper email that it could be from. Your MAC address prefix, if you have one. Migration settings, high availability settings, U2F settings, and then I think this is two-factor settings. Bandwidth limits, if you have any you want to set, you can set them here. And then finally, maximal work, bulk action 4. So a little bit of stuff here that you can kind of look at and kind of check out the actual options. As we go down, you'll see storage, and here you can say add storage, and there's a whole process you go through for that, but we'll do that in a different way here in a little bit. You can create backups from the system. You can do replication of the system. Now it says here again, replication needs at least 2 nodes, which makes total sense. I've only got 1 node. What am I going to replicate to? Permissions, so you can set up permissions rules and things like that. And then you have things underneath that for users. So of course you only see 1 user, and I can add a new user in a little bit. The API tokens, you can create groups and then add users to those groups. And pools, roles, so this is where you create roles for the users. These are just the default roles and roles that are already set up. And then you have authentication here at the bottom. And you have PAM or PVE by default. You can add other authentication types, though we don't have any set up right now. So we're just going to use the PAM. High availability is always of interest to people. So there's high availability groups and high availability fencing is what it's called. So we'll have to kind of dig into that a little bit later. Acme, I think this is where you can go and actually get some Let's Encrypt certificates for your different virtual machines that you're going to be running. Firewall, of course, you can set up a firewall for the machines or for the host machine itself. So you can kind of go down through here and look at the firewall, whether it's on or off, set up some rules for it, things like that. There are security groups as well. You do have an alias that you can create for some of the firewall settings, and then IP sets. So you do have a metrics server. So if you have a metrics server that you're running, you can add that and then send out metrics information from Proxmox to that server. And then there's some support information, but it says no valid subscription because we have not subscribed whenever it popped up that stuff. Now, when you see this user interface down at the bottom, there's also tasks that have been completed or that are in the process of being completed. They'll give you different status information out here depending on what's going on with them. And then you also have a cluster log that you can see about information for your clusters. We generally just stay on tasks, and then I keep it kind of small down here at the bottom so it doesn't take up so much space. When we go into the Proxmox setup, you see that there's a different set of actual menu items. So it is context sensitive here on the menu. But here you can see that there's notes. So you can add notes about your node. You have the shell for the actual node itself. So here's root at Proxmox. So we can do an ls, and there's nothing really here, but we should be able to do a sudo apt update, and I think you can do this through the UI anyways. But update, or actually you don't need sudo on Debian. Sorry, apt update and apt upgrade -y. So this thing's going to go out there and try to do the update and upgrade for us. Basically, try to get all the packages updated and upgraded for us. And there's some things that you can do to get some newer packages on top of what's already here for Proxmox, even if you don't use their subscription service. But it's a little bit tense sometimes. Now, see, I get these errors when I do it this way, but there are upgrades that we can do on the system, as I recall, from the user interface. And right here is updates that you can actually access from the user interface, and you can see here's all the things that it found that it needs to update in the system today. And you can just, so if you click here, you'll get other options. So you can say no VNC, Spice, kind of how you want to open this up. I just click on the upgrade button and let it do what it does. It's going to open up a little web-based terminal application. It's going to ask you, are you sure you want to do this? And you can just say yes. I think yes. So I can make this font bigger, but it's going to make everything in the background bigger as well. So be aware of that. You can adjust the size of the window so things fit better, but we'll just do yes, and we'll let that start updating. And it's going to run through the normal update and upgrade process for Debian there in the background. So we'll kind of let that run. It does work from there. For whatever reason, it doesn't work from the just doing it through the shell, the interactive shell there that I opened earlier. So when you see this line during an update, this usually means that it's actually building a new kernel. So you just need to be aware that this could be building a new kernel. And generally when you get a new kernel, it's a good idea to reboot the machine. So now that we've completed that, we're just going to type in reboot, and we'll see if it actually reboots the machine here. Yes, so it's telling me disconnecting, and it's going to reboot that system. We'll give it just a minute, and then we'll refresh, and we'll come back. Alright, so we've refreshed it. That took like 20 seconds. I mean, it was really fast. Now, I have an SSD running on that machine, but it was really fast reboot, which was great. And we're back and we see that there's no more upgrades, no packages to get, so that's great. So the upgrades are pretty much done that were already sitting there, which is great. So again, you have firewall rules, you have options, and you have the log. So these are firewall rules for the Proxmox node itself. So there's the firewall options, and then here are the logs for the firewall. And then you have the part that's actually of interest to us at this point, which is setting up our disks and setting up our logical volume management. So if we go into here, you can see I've got a few of these already set up. They've got names and they're really kind of ready to go. And they already have things on them, as a matter of fact. We do have ZFS as an option if you want to set up some ZFS volumes. I haven't done that yet. And then we have directories, but we haven't created any directories yet. And then finally, LVM thin. I don't really know what that is, but LVM is the one that we would want to use. And if you look at the usage here, you can see that, first of all, on PVE, this is the Proxmox main node, so it's SDC3. So you can see that one is pretty full. And here it's kind of talking about, that one's in use. We don't have any way to use that one. But up here we have /dev/SDE. That's my 8 terabyte drive, my 4 terabyte drive, and my 3 terabyte drive. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to say I want to create a directory because I need to upload some volumes or some ISOs to actually get to do this. So no disks unused. Let's go see what I can figure out here. Give me a second. Oops, don't want that. Go away. So we're going to go back to disks. I should have some disks that I can initialize. So like this one here I can initialize. LVM I can't. This one I can initialize, and this one I can initialize. So I'm going to say initialize disk, and it's going to say OK. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take these disks here and I'm going to create LVM spaces. Now you could create ZFS RAIDs with them if you want to. So you can say create ZFS, and then you can pick the drives. Now before you do this, again, even with ZFS in this case, it's really wanting you to use drives of the same size. So you'd want to use like 2 or 3 or 4 2 terabyte drives, all 2 terabyte or all 1 terabyte or all 500 gigabyte, whatever, and create your RAID out of it. Don't try to do this with different size volumes because it will just give you a warning on the screen. And here I'll show you, we'll just call this ZFS. We'll just call this media pool. And then let's pick this 2 terabyte and let's pick this 700 gigabyte and that 3 terabyte drive. And then we're going to not tell it it's a single disk. Now you can use ZFS for single disk if you want. But we're going to say RAID Z, which is kind of like RAID 5, I guess you'd say. It has one unit of parity on it. It says compression on and A shift 12. I don't know what this changes, but I'm not going to change it. If you don't want compression on, you can change the compression. But I'm going to say create. And you see it's going to tell me it failed. And if we go back, it says ZFS is not compatible with disks backed by a hardware RAID controller. So that's important for you to know. But what happens is these drives are of different sizes and it can't do that. Now, when I did that, it gave a command, so I'll just use those two. Pool, or these 3 again, I don't know, it's fine. Actually not that one, but this one. And we'll go back to RAID Z. If I click on the right one, and I'll click create. So it's going to try, but it's going to tell you, oh, this command failed. So you can literally from that, just start after that little single quote, copy this whole command all the way down to that spot right before the last single quote. You can copy that, paste it into the terminal, and then right here after create, you can put -F, like force, and then it will do it. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to get a pool the size of that smallest drive. So be aware of that. If you don't have several drives that are the same size, you're not going to get all the space out of it that you want. It's just not going to be great. So I'm going to create an LVM here, and I'm going to call this is SDB. So you can see the sizes if you expand this down. So this is my 2 terabyte drive. That's fine. We're going to call that I'm going to call that VM1, and we're going to hit create. It's going to create this logical volume here. So if I click on this, you'll see I see VM1 now inside my node. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a directory. So I'm going to create a directory, and I'm going to use this small one here, because I just need to upload some ISOs. Use ext4 for the file system. You can use XFS if you want to, but I'm going to use ext4. I'm going to call this ISOs, and this kind of messed with me last time. I think there's something wrong with this drive maybe, but we'll see. So I'm going to create it. It's going to do this thing, so it's got to go through, it's going to format it as ext4, it's going to give it a label and everything like that. Now, a lot of you guys have asked me about Proxmox in the past. A lot of you are Proxmox users, so I promise you that you know more about Proxmox than I do at this point. I know how to get in and do a few things like this and set up the system so that I can actually go and do a couple of things. So now you can see that I've got my ISOs and I've got my VMs. So I'm going to go to ISOs, and I'm going to go to ISO images, and I'm going to say upload. So I'm just going to grab an ISO image here out of my downloads folder, and some of you guys have asked about Open Media Vault, so we'll grab that one and we will upload it. And you can see the progress as it uploads across my network from the machine that I'm on to my Proxmox server. So it's just moving over that file and putting it on that drive in that directory that I just created called ISOs. Alright, so once it finishes, then you can see Open Media Vault sitting here as an ISO, and you can upload more ISOs to this if you want to. I don't want to make you guys sit through that, but you can. So now I want to go create a VM. So I'm going to go over here to VMs, and I don't actually have to click on that, I have it set up already. But up here in the upper right, you see there's these buttons that are always here. So I'm going to do this create VM. Now, I'm not a pro at this, but I'm going to say, node is Proxmox. I've only got one node. The VM ID has to be different, and if you create containers, those IDs also have to be different from the VM IDs and vice versa. So you can't have any IDs that are the same. But it starts at 100 by default, so I'm going to leave it. And I'm going to call this Open Media Vault, and then I'm just going to click on Next. So the storage spot is in ISOs, indeed, and I'm going to click that so that it shows me the options, and if you have more, it'll show you those in the drop down, and then pick the ISO that you want to use. You do want to set this use CD DVD disk image file, in this case ISO. If you have a physical CD DVD drive on your machine, then you could put one in and use it, and then of course do not use any media if you're going to do some other way of getting the image built. And then it'll pick usually the right kernel version, but if you have one that's an older version, or if it's the wrong system, you can go in here and select it, but it should detect that. So we're going to go to System, and we're going to say it graphics card is default, and I'm just going to leave these alone. I don't really mess with these. If you know more about what you're doing and you know, hey, yes, I can absolutely change these, then go for it. Hard disk. So this is saying it's a SCSI disk, and what do I want to do with it? So where do I want to store it? I don't want to store it in ISOs. I want to store it in VM1s. And you see that this goes away. So if I set this to ISOs, it has this thing like, okay, what kind of image format do you want to use here? In this case, I'm going to set this to use VM1, and you see that option goes away, and it just goes to RAW automatically. And then cache, so default, no cache. Of course, you could try to cache things if you want to, but I don't want to in this case. And then CPU. So again, sockets, I only have one. If you have multiple sockets, you could add that there. I do have 4 cores, so I'm going to give it 2 cores. Memory, I'm going to give it 4096 for Open Media Vault. That seems okay. I've never really run Open Media Vault in production, but it seems to work pretty well. Network, so I'm just going to leave this pretty much alone. Don't check the no network device, but the bridge, we just want to use that, and then VirtIO. As far as what we're using for the networking is fine. I don't want to mess with it. And then it's going to set up VLAN. So I didn't turn on the VLAN stuff, but you can turn on VLAN stuff, but you got to do that somewhere else in the system. And I don't use VLANs anyways, so no big deal. But if you use VLANs, you'll want to turn that on first, and then come set up VLANs if you want that. And then finally, double check everything you've set. Just confirm it, make sure it looks good. And then it says start after created. So if you don't check this box, it'll create the virtual machine, but it won't boot it, and you'll have to go start it manually. So I'm going to leave that off just to show you that, but we'll click Finish. And it usually doesn't take very long, and you can see it already popped up here with 100. And it says status unknown, so we'll kind of look down here, and it says VM 100 create, and it says OK. Maybe I didn't name this thing right. Oh no, it says Open Media Vault right there. Good. And you can see here, status is stopped. And the first time I did that, I just didn't notice that checkbox. I was like, well, why didn't it start it? So I thought something might have gone wrong. So you just click on Start up here, and it will get it started up, and it'll show you that it's running. And once you do that, you can go look at the console. And again, because this is starting up like it's an ISO disk, you have to go to the console, and you can see the installer. So you can say install serial console, advanced options. Of course, you just want to go with install. So I can drag this down, and I think that will grow a bit. And I think we can kind of drag this over, and that'll make it grow maybe, I don't know. So you can do some different things to try to make this a little bit better, but I'm going to hit enter. And this is just like we're looking at the terminal, which is kind of awesome, right? I don't have to be at the machine to get to the terminal. But here it detects my language. I'm just going to hit OK, or I'm going to hit enter. And then here it detects my country. If you need to change it, make sure to change that first, but I'm going to hit enter. And then up here it detected American English, which is great, so I'm just going to again hit enter. And it's going to do a few things, and then it'll pop up with a couple more prompts. So at the end, you'll get this basic message that says installation is complete, and it's time to basically start using the system. So it's going to say boot into your new system, so you hit enter for the continue button. And once you get to the Open Media Vault login, the system's really up and running. So you can kind of go back out of the console here, and you can first click on hardware, and you can kind of check out all of the information. So you can see the memory, and this is where you can make edits whenever the system's not running. You can add hardware as well to the system this way. If you go look at the summary, you'll see a whole bunch of information about the system as well as how it's running. But you'll notice that it says there's no IPs, there's no guest agent configured. So I'm not sure why it doesn't pick up on what the IP address is for that thing. I don't know what I need to install for that yet, but it's easy enough to go find this out. We go back to the console and we log in, and then we do IP ADR show, and it's going to show you the IP addresses that it has set, and one of those should be like your local network address, which in this case is 192.168.7.24. That looks like a 6 to me. So if we open up a new browser tab outside of Proxmox, we can probably just type in openmediavault.local and get there. Oh, look at that, we can. And it goes right to it. Now, we can go ahead and log in with the username we set up. Oh no, it has default username. Sorry, I'm trying to use the user for the actual system, but that's incorrect. You want to use admin, and then the password is openmediavault. So the default password is lowercase admin, and then, so the default username is lowercase admin, ADMIN, and the default password is all lowercase, all together, openmediavault. So you'll need that the first time you log in, and then you can change that or add a new user. Well, you should change it and then also add a new user. So if you look in Open Media Vault, it's pretty cool. There's a lot here. I'm going to do a whole separate video on Open Media Vault, but we do have it installed and running, and we should be able to go back to Proxmox now and go to hardware, and we should say add, I think. So we ought to be able to do, let's see if we can do a USB device. Interesting. So it sees my cruiser blade that I still have plugged in there. That's interesting. A USB 3.0 device. So there, yeah, there's some interesting stuff here. So here's my Seagate drive, and we can say add. Hey, there's our third disk. All right. So it did have to have a little reboot just because I added that actual drive to the system. But I did do that through Proxmox. So I just clicked on here on the hardware list, clicked on add, picked the drive, went and did a reboot. Now it wouldn't reboot or shut down from here for some reason. I had to go into the console until it shut down, and then I probably could have just told it to reboot. and then start it again. But once I did that and it came back up, now it sees this third drive. So if you'd like to run things from Proxmox and run your Open Media Vault as a virtual machine on your existing Proxmox machine, it is completely possible, which is kind of awesome. And I imagine you could do RockStore this way too. I'm going to give it a try and see what I can figure out, and I'll make a video of it when I do it so you guys can either see me succeed or fail. But this is Proxmox, just at a very high level overview of it. I think it's really a great system. I really like what I see here with it. It's got a lot of really cool features, and I think there's just tons that you can do with it, of course. I mean, it just seems like a really incredible piece of software, so I'm excited to kind of kick into it a little bit more and see what I can do with it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.